Hello, my name is Felix Munger. I work for the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention as their Executive Director and at the Viessmann Centre for Engagement and Research in Sustainability, or VERiS, at Laurier University as a Research Fellow. The video you're about to watch is a compilation of recordings from 2021. They include 4 recordings from workshops of an exploratory research project investigating the nexus of climate change and community safety, and Dr. Roxanne Springer presenting at the 2021 annual conference of the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention during the final keynote panel. Here's a bit of background. In late 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Roxanne Springer and I submitted a proposal to the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada on behalf of the Viessmann Centre of Engagement and Research in Sustainability at Laurier University in Ontario, Canada. We applied for a grant to conduct a small exploratory project to map the link between climate change and community safety. The idea for this work had been in the back of my mind for a good 2 years, following a conversation with Dr. Robert Munger, discussing our perceived lack of attention to the topic of climate change in the context of urban security. You will see Robert Munger later in the video. So when COVID-19 emerged and illustrated what can happen when there is a lack of preparedness in the case of an emergency such as a hazard, supply chain failure, and of course a pandemic, I realized that we really need to advance the conversation how climate change will impact urban security in the short and the long term. During the exploratory study called Mapping Climate Change and Community Safety, Roxanne Springer and I brought together over 30 people, including academics, safety and security experts, climate change experts, and representatives from national organizations over 3 workshops to collectively attempt to map the nexus of climate change and community safety and violence. Originally, we set out to investigate the existing potential connections and correlations between climate change hazards and public safety outcomes in a municipal or local context, bearing in mind that there has been more attention paid to the international and national safety and security implications related to climate change. More specifically, we wanted to map potential climate change hazards, vulnerabilities, and safety outcomes at the local level, thinking about what connections are more likely to occur or should be of greater concern by providing a forum for interdisciplinary collaboration. Conceptually, here's what our findings looked like, showing the immense complexity of the issues at hand. Moreover, based on the experience of COVID-19, we suspected from the beginning that those communities that already experience high levels of vulnerability would also be more vulnerable to climate change-related hazards. For this reason, we purposely included community organizations from the beginning, representing population groups experiencing higher levels of vulnerabilities to crime and violence, such as people of color, Indigenous peoples, LGBTQ+ community members, immigrants, women, girls, and so on. The connection between climate change hazards to, for instance, flooding or wildfires, and outcomes like increased poverty crimes or domestic violence is complex at best, and there is quite a bit of overlap between various kinds of hazards and the outcomes. Roxanne Springer will explain this in more detail at the end of the videos. Overall, there are 3 main learnings from the exploratory project. First, while there is existing research linking climate change hazards and safety, there is no comprehensive review or compendium that could support practitioners. This makes it difficult for those tasked or those interested in including crime prevention into climate change adaptation and emergency management planning, and vice versa. More research clearly is needed. Second, in Canada, climate change adaptation and community safety both work in silos. As far as we could find, there is no climate change adaptation plan that includes considerations of crime and safety, and vice versa. Third, climate change-related community safety planning needs an equity lens. Listening to the presentation by Trevor Hancock, Conrad Prince, Kim Vance Mobunga, and Roxanne Springer will clarify the reasons why. Let me move on now. The first presentation is by Trevor Hancock, who's a retired professor and senior scholar at the School of Public Health and Social Policy at the University of Victoria in British Columbia. The presentation was recorded as part of the first workshop of the research project in May 2021. In his presentation, titled Climate Change and Community Safety, the Big Picture, Dr. Hancock argues that climate change is part of the bigger picture of global ecological change and that the range of challenges to community safety is broad. The second presentation is by Robert Munger, who is a specialist in cities, security, migration, and new technologies. Dr. Munger is one of the leading scholars on security and development in urban areas and the co-founder of the Igrape Institute, a think and do tank devoted to using new technologies to tackle global challenges. The presentation was recorded as part of the second workshop in early June 2021. In his presentation, titled Climate Crime Connection, he argues that climate change will be very destructive and will have increased consequences on cities, including how climate change can affect criminality. The third presentation is by Conrad Prince, who is the director of the National Reconciliation Program at Save the Children, and Tyrone Monroe, who is the regional wellness manager at Four Arrows Regional Health Authority. In their presentation, Conrad Prince and Tyrone Monroe present on Indigenous realities, a rights-based approach, and discuss the intersection of state-sanctioned violence and climate change and community safety. The fourth presentation is by Kim Vance Mobanga, Director of the International Programs and Partnerships at IGAL, Canada. Kim Vance Mobanga discusses the historical context for 2S LGBTQ communities and crime and violence in Canada. She further discusses the types of state and collective violence targeted at 2S LGBTQ people and the intersection with climate change. In a final presentation, Roxanne Springer discusses the implications for community safety practitioners of the findings of the exploratory study. The video was recorded during the final keynote panel at CMNCP 21, the annual conference and AGM of the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention.